Hi, everyone, and welcome to my little freebie on an introduction to peaceful multicultural parenting. I've put this together because when I first started this journey into coaching, one of the things I focused on a lot were multicultural families. All of my first one-to-one clients were actually multicultural families, and a lot of the parents that got in touch with me were talking about the challenges within their families based on different cultures. And it just really got me to thinking about what we mean by multicultural families and how being a multicultural family can affect your parenting. So, welcome to the first of 3 videos in this workbook. The idea is, which I've already explained, but just to recap, that you go through the workbook until you reach the yellow boxes that tell you to watch the video, and then you watch the video. So this is video number 1. And I'm going to talk about the issues that stop families from being able to address conflict in their homes. First up, I'm going to define what I mean by multicultural families. So a multicultural family could be a family that is composed of one parent plus others, 2 parents, who have very different cultural backgrounds around parenting. Now, it's an interesting one, that, because a multicultural family could be a family that comes from 2 different countries. Okay, so 2 parents from 2 different countries, 2 parents from 2 different ethnic groups within the same country, tribes within the same country. It could be 2 parents who come from 2 different religions, but born and raised within the same country. So those are kind of the classic multicultural families that we think of. But I like to take it one step further and also talk about multiculturalism as referring to the culture of parenting. So maybe you and your parenting partner grew up in the same village, the same ethnic group, tribe, the same religion, etc., etc., but 2 very different experiences of being parented. And in you, that's going to create a parenting culture. And one of my very first clients, a father that I worked with, used to say to me that, Anthony, I am a case study of one. And he was right. His idea was that the culture in which he is raising his child was based very much on the way that he was raised. And so he had this culture of being parented, and his wife had this culture. And it was challenging for them to meet somewhere and to find common ground in their parenting. And so that was the cause for a lot of conflict. Obviously, there's also very obvious causes of conflict in families. Different religious influences, for example, can be complex. As I said, different ethnic or tribal influences are going to be complex in a family. Even different priorities within a family are going to cause conflict potentially. If one parent's priority is, for example, creative expression and freedom and child-led activities, for example, and another parent's priority is academic success and academic progress, then those are quite conflicting, because let me tell you, as an ex-teacher, educational institutions are not particularly child-led or free thinking. There, I said it. Okay, just between you and me. So that's going to create a conflict. Okay. And conflicts arise not because of those differences. They arise because of the struggles that we as parents have in dealing with those differences. So having a difference is not in and of itself a conflict. How you deal with that difference is what's going to determine whether that difference turns into a point of conflict or not. So it's about your feelings about that difference and how you deal with your feelings about that difference. Here we go. I keep checking my notes so I make sure I cover it all for you. Okay. Some of you will have a part or parts that are conflict avoidant. That will be because of previous experiences that you've had where, for whatever reason, you've developed a belief that leads you to be conflict avoidant, not wanting to face conflict. And that has several outcomes. It may be that you shut down and you just refuse to talk about something. You put your head in the sand, you do the ostrich trick. It may be that you come out strong. Okay, so this conflict avoidant part of you is silent, and then let's rip. So when we talk about being conflict avoidant, that usually has two outcomes. And obviously neither of those are going to be particularly helpful to solving this parenting challenge. You may be a person who is energetically conflict seeking, I call it. It's a little phrase that I've coined, that I've created. And it's kind of based a little bit on myself when I started my own work in this, and I thought, what is it that is making me be this way? At the time, I believed that I had a conflict-seeking energy, and I did. The reasons for it can be varied. In my case, was because I grew up in a household where at least one of my parents enjoyed conflict sometimes. Sort of the sparring, I guess, they thought was interesting, and so I definitely picked up that energy and the idea that I could seek conflict. So if I see a difference and I'm an energetically conflict seeking person, I'm going to go after that point of difference. I'm going to pick it apart. I'm going to lay it bare. And I'm going to do that in a very high energy way. You may struggle with points of difference because you have a fear of expressing your needs in your household. So again, a point of difference might become challenging for you because you have a need that you want met. And that point of difference speaks to that need that you have. So if you feel like your needs are not being met, that is going to give you some feelings. If your needs are not being met through that difference, that's going to give you some feelings that can be difficult to express. You may have struggles in emotional expression. And that is particularly for those of us who grew up in homes where emotional expression was just not a thing that people did. People didn't talk about their feelings. And if you haven't practiced that, it means that your brain connections between the emotional side of your brain and your wordy linguistic part of your brain are very poor. They're not fully richly developed. They're fully developed. They're not richly developed. And so that means that when you come to discuss a point of difference, if you're struggling to express your feelings about it in a complete and healthy way, then that is going to cause some conflict, right? Because the language that you use, the words that you use are not going to necessarily be collaborative and helpful to the situation. You may also tend towards the use of what I would call violent communication, which is the opposite of what I coach in, which is non-violent communication. And that is basically when you try and communicate something to the person that you're with. And this is a little bit of the expressing needs part as well. You try and communicate to the person that you're with your feelings about this point of difference, and they don't hear you. Again, because of the way that you are doing that it feels to them very uncomfortable. It feels accusatory. It might feel violent, offensive, personal. And so if you're in that situation and you're trying to talk to somebody and they are having those feelings about the way that you're communicating, again, that is not going to get you to where you want to be. So that's a really quick summary. There's lots of stuff we could unpack about that. A lot of it is generational patterns and cycles, and I know many of you watching this will be trying to break generational patterns and cycles. Stay strong. And also what I've noticed is that although many of us are good at breaking cycles, we're not necessarily quite so skilled in making new cycles. And so a lot of this workbook is very much about you breaking cycles and then also being able to make new cycles that work for you and your family. So what I want you to do now, having watched this, and you can watch this as many times as you need, what I would like you to do now is I'd like you to go back to your workbook and continue the reflective work in the workbook, and particularly think about what are the issues that make it hard for you to talk about these differences in your home. What is it that you personally are struggling with? What is that part of you that finds it really hard? And where does that part of you come from? What is the basis for that difficulty? And I will be back with video number 2.